Good evening. Welcome to our final webinar in our series on the 18th edition draft for public comment. My name is Steve Walton and I'm the scheme manager here at NAPIT. With me tonight is Frank Bertie, the NAPIT Trade Association and Technical Director, and Richard Townsend, Technical Development Engineer here at NAPIT. They're going to take you through the presentation. There'll be questions throughout and at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to use the Ask a Question function, which is in your control panel. For most people, this will be in the right hand of your screen. We'll then do our very best to get through as many of these as possible. You'll also find a copy of the presentation and a certificate of attendance in the handout section in the control panel. You can download for your records if you wish. We'll leave a few minutes at the end of the session to give you time to do this. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar and we'd really appreciate your feedback also. That way we can make these as useful as possible going forward. So I'll pass you through to Frank and Richard to get things started.
Good evening, everybody. We are going to go through the final webinar on the 18th edition draft for public comment. It's myself, Frank Bertie, Group Technical Director and Chairman of the Trade Association, and Richard Townsend, the Technical Development Engineer. So we're going to go through what is the DPC. We'll just briefly touch on this again, just to make sure you're all aware of what's involved with it. The DPC is a means to allow the electrical industry and other interested stakeholders to review the proposed new 18th edition and to submit comments on the content of it. This will then allow JPL 64, the committee responsible for BS 7671, to consider the comments received for inclusion or to revise the wording within the new standard.
Okay, so where can we find the DPC? In previous years, the DPC has been available as a download, etc., either on the IT website or on the DSI website, and you've generally handed in a predetermined PDF or Word document, which the IT and DSI then collate and come together with a series of comments. This time round, very much different, very much more digitally based. It's only available on a BSI website. You do have to register, as Frank's just explained. There's a small screenshot there of what it looks like once you've registered. The address is up there on that slide. That's it. Register and comment. Have your say.
So how do you gain access to DPC? It's on the BSI TAPS website, and you register by entering a few details. Just your email address and password for it. This allows you to access it, to view the DPC and make comments on it. If you look at our first webinar on the from the 6th of June, you can see how to register and comment in more detail.
So, in addition to all of these requirements and the things that me and Frank have just sort of been through, due to the sheer size of the DPC this time around, the website had some initial issues. If you tried to go on earlier when it first came out, you will have noticed the website was very slow and would lock up, and that was because the document was just so large. The full DPC is also now available to download, which it wasn't before, and to handle all of the different comments that people have been making, it's been split into 4. So the first part is the foreword up to part 4, then parts 5 up to part 6, part 7 up to part 8, and the appendices. So there's a small screenshot of what that looks like, and you get to pick one or whichever part you want to comment on. As Frank and myself have just been through, please comment. It's extremely important.
Right, so for submitting your comments, remember the deadline for the comments is the 23rd of August 2017. And this is a very important stage, and there's 2 ways to achieve making your comments. The first is to make the comment and then give a proposed change and submit your comments live there and then. And remember, they're looking for a comment against the regulation and a proposed change. Without submitting both of these, none of the comments will be accepted. The second way is to make a comment or a number of comments, again with the accompanying proposed changes, which you could save, review and submit, or delete if you want to on the later dates. Then remember to submit them if you do save any comments you have.
So, what are the value of your comments? Well, they're massively valuable. The National Committee use them to gauge if the work they've been doing over the last couple of years has been useful. They use them to gauge whether new regulations that are coming in, changes to international documentations that are going to be used, are actually useful to us. If not, your comments are how those things then get altered. It's absolutely vital that you choose to save any comments. If you choose to make several proposals and comments and then store them up to submit at a later date, it's absolutely so important that you go back and submit them. If you don't, and we get to the deadline date, anything that you've saved but you haven't submitted will just be lost, deleted, and all of your hard work in commenting and taking the time to go and do that register will all be gone.
I was going to look at the first of the regulations we've got comments on. Throughout the DPC, there are a lot of comments which you can make, a lot of changes, a lot of editorials, things like that. But we're going to concentrate on a few chosen regulations which we believe are going to have the most effect on our electrical industry. So the first one we're looking at is 411.3.3. Now, previously, you can see in the changes on the screen where it's green and red, where the red's been removed, the green are the new proposals for the 18th edition. So it states there the is now additional requirements for socket outlets for the supply of mobile equipment for use outdoors. So it's also added in there that it's a 30 milliamp RCD, not exceeding 30 milliamps. And then the first of the bullet points, it has changed from 20 amps to 32 amps. So the rating of the socket outlets that have to be protected by an RCD has increased to 32 amps. And it remains the mobile equipment outdoors is still 32 amps. And as you can see from the deleted sections in red, the two bullet points have gone. So the area for the risk assessment, except for the dwelling, has been removed, and the specific labelled item for socket outlets has been removed as well. The three notes have gone, and one of the notes that applied to FELV and reduced low voltage systems are now part of the regulation and not a note. And it just says they don't need to be included in this regulation for RCD protection.
Okay, because there are so many different permutations or possible issues with the changes to this regulation, we as a trade body are going to be answering questions shortly, or we're going to be answering what a proposed comment based around what we feel is relevant for a particular industry, that industry being the events industry. However, there is very much more to deal with. So I'm just going to go through three questions that I want you to answer, to take a look at. And at the end of this single comment, the questions will appear again. And we'll invite you to ask us if any of those questions are an issue to you, or you want some advice, and we'll try and answer them. But it's more to show you how many different types of industry can be affected by one change to a regulation, and how important it is for you to make a comment should you feel it affects you. So, first one. So we change from 20 amps to 32 amp socket outlets. Ask yourself a question. Ask yourself if that's going to affect the things that you do for your industry. Because if it does, you need to comment. And second one, the removal of the RCD risk assessments other than a dwelling. In your business, did you do a lot of that? Did you carry out risk assessments for other than dwellings? Does it form part of a large part of what you do? And will this change affect that? The removal of specific labelled socket outlets not RCD protected. In your business, your day-to-day work, is this an area that you deal with, that you've had to do, that affects you? Will this new regulation affect you? If it does, make a proposal. Like I said, we're now going to go through a different thing that affects a different industry and see that from NAPIT's proposal before we return and answer a couple of questions just on these three questions that I've just put to you now. So we go forward.
So we're looking at our comment on regulation 411.3.3. The changes to this regulation are directly aimed at outside locations, as referred in part 711 in regulation 711, 411 0.3.3. However, the new regulation gives no usable advice for the connection or use of equipment within the confines of Part 711. We feel there needs to be further information to give clarity to those affected installation of shows and exhibitions in that type of sector within our industry.
So, again, a comment followed by a proposal. So, NAPIT are proposing to add the following to 711.411.3.3, which will incorporate a new 200 series UK only reg. If you like, this will allow a temporary distribution circuit, if you like, a pre-tested extension lead for distribution circuits only. That will go from source to a site board or some other kind of arrangement. And from that point on, socket outlet circuits or final circuits will comply with the requirements of 711.411.3.3 and particular RCD requirements. The important part is that it doesn't stifle the events industry by having a requirement to have a 30 milliamp RCD and what's essentially a distribution circuit, which then may feed 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 other RCDs, which may have a build-up of leakage current and cause your main RCD to drop out in the middle of an event. Audio, events equipment notoriously have leakage currents, large leakage currents. And so the new regulation proposal could be a serious issue to them. So NAPIT have addressed this with this proposed new UK-only regulation, which will sit in 711 and refer to 711.411.3.3. We feel that this would help that industry greatly. So that's what we're going to do. So we're just going to move back to the three questions that I asked you to start with. Frank's just going to, me and Frank will go through those.
So change from 20 amp to 32 amp socket outlets. Is this going to affect the work you carry out? Do you have any questions on this side of it that could affect your workload?
No, guess not.
Okay, so a couple of questions we've had. The first one is, I install a lot of 32 amp commandos in data centers. Does that mean they've all got to be RCD protected?
With this change to the regulation, those type of socket outlets would fall under this regulation, and it would mean that all these 32 amp commando type sockets would have to have RCD protection under this regulation. That's one of the effects of the change to this would come in and would affect your workload. So then you'd be recommending to your client that all 32 amp socket outlets would have to have RCD protection.
Okay, and the next one, is this going to affect three-phase 32 amp commando sockets as well?
Yeah, it will. A socket's a socket, 32 amp socket, regardless of whether it's single or multi-phase, it doesn't matter. The regulation is not domestic, industrial, single phase or multi-phase reliant. It covers everything.
And under the previous regulation, 16 amp three-phase sockets would have been affected as well. Any further questions on that first point? No. So we'll go to the second question. The removal of the RCD risk assessment for other than the dwelling. This has been in effect, and part of the reason for removing it, there has been a bit of abuse of an RCD risk assessment. Do you have any questions on that that's come through?
Right, does this mean we will have to install RCDs for all socket outlets in offices?
Again, similar to the last one, yes, this now falls under the regulation and would require RCD protection on all socket outlets.
However, as we've said, if this forms a large part of your business and you feel that that would be damaging to it, then it would be for you to put a comment in and a proposal to modify that, should you feel it would damage your business by just bringing that straight in. In the same way that NAPIT have taken on board the issues that the events industry would have by putting forward a proposal in 711.
And we'll move to the final question. The removal of the specifically labelled socket outlets that are not RC protected. Any questions on that topic?
Okay, so that's all the questions we have for the time being, so if we can move on.
Yep.
To you guys.
Proposed DPC alteration, overvoltage control 443.4. As an organisation, NAPIT are failing to understand how this can come in. It's asking for protection, surge protection, transient overvoltage, etc. But it's also saying that if it's a single dwelling unit and the total value of the installation, etc., doesn't justify any protection, you don't have to do it. Or it could be left for, or you could deduce whether you wanted to or not. It's asking for generator supplies, storage units, etc. It's very wishy-washy. The risk assessment's not really there. So we don't feel that we can accept all of that, to risk assess based on someone's understanding of value of an installation. So we're going to propose something else.
On our comment on this, we feel this proposed new regulation is unachievable. BS 7671 cannot give guidance on the type of dwelling and perceived worth of that dwelling or its contents as to whether it should receive protection from the effects of surge or not. The risk assessment process is long-winded, it's unclear, it's based on data that is 7 years out of date when 18th is published, and up to 10 years out of date by the end of its life cycle. If the environmental overvoltage problem has been increasing, then it makes sense to use current data or not use outdated data at all. As almost every circuit and installation needs to comply, there will be no risk assessment. The risk assessment needs to be simplified or removed completely.
Well, Frank's gone through the comment. We've obviously got some proposals. We've got two that are very similar. First one, he's just removed the second two paragraphs that are asking for risk assessments, and basically just saying, for all of the cases, the client or the person ordering the work, as they've got the information and the knowledge, should be consulted to confirm their own requirements to install protection, because they are the ones that know what the true cost is, whether that's a data center or it's material, etc., etc. So, to be fair, it's really down to the client and the designer. The second proposal is an even shorter version, and basically we're just saying, for all of the cases, there's no requirement to install overvoltage protection unless specified by the client. In both cases, it's down to the client to carry out a risk assessment of their own installation, their own usage, their own equipment, and their own needs to decide whether they want to pay the extra cost of overvoltage protection, because it's down to them.
So the next one is a DPC comment we have for regulation 443.5, and this is round about the risk assessment. And as you can see from the items on the screen, it's looking at calculate risk level to determine the transient overvoltage of atmospheric origin, and it gives you a formula. It gives you an environmental factor, and which is selected from a table 443.1. It's got a risk assessment length in kilometres. It's got lightning ground flash density in flashes per kilometre square per year, relevant to the location of power line and connected structure, and it gives the two figures in which this refers to. So we've got figure 443.1 and 443.2, which are going to be shown over in the next slide.
So, as we can see, all of that really complex information that Frank's just gone through, you're also going to need these figures. We're not sure yet how those are going to be incorporated in 7671, because 7671 is a grey shade or grayscale document. Those are quite obviously in colour, and they're giving you the information you require. They are maps from a different source to BS 7671. So, NAPIT, we don't feel you can ask someone to carry out what's essentially an extremely complex risk assessment process based around documentation and information you've got to fetch from somewhere else to come back to the standard that you were initially using. So we don't feel there's too much mileage in this at this early stage. So we're going to be proposing something else. So.
And as Richard said, we feel this proposed new regulation is unachievable. Its guidance on regulation is unreliable, it's inaccurate, it's impractical to implement, and it should be removed for a similar alternative, or as we do for BS 5839 for firearms and BS 5266 for emergency lighting systems. We could refer to that standard within this part of the regulations.
Pretty simple there. Our proposal, as Frank's just mentioned, it's completely, it's neither a reliable or an accurate way or a practical way to assess the risk by going to a different source to get different bits of information and come back to the source, to the main British standard and attempt to evaluate whether you need to fit, use or carry on in a particular way. So NAPIT proposal is quite blunt. It's not reliable, remove it completely.
And the next one is, we have another comment on Regulation 531.3.1. And the proposed DPC alteration states a protective conductor current shall not contribute to the measurement of residual current.
And as Frank said, a protected conductor current shall not contribute to the measurement of residual current. Well, how is that actually possible? It's not possible for a protected conductor not to contribute to the measurement of residual current. That is actually the residual current, so it needs to be taken account of. Manufacturer's data states outside BS 7601 that account should be taken when selecting devices. It's almost contradicted if we look at 531.3.2 indent 2, it almost contradicts that statement. So the statement's not logical, practical, it's not physically possible. It needs to be removed or looked at again. So again, NAPIT will be making a negative proposal.
And the proposal is remove the following wording from 531.3.1. Take this out, it's not very clear, it's not practical, and it's incorrect.
Okay, and extremely thought-provoking this one. Integration of devices and components. It's a proposal to ask that or require that if you fit equipment into distribution boards, consumer units, enclosures, etc., or similar, the devices you fit in shall only be those declared suitable by that assembly manufacturer's instructions or literature. So what does that mean? Well, if you're going to go and fit a timer, contactor, any types of surge protection device, etc., into a distribution board or consumer unit, it must be made by or declared acceptable by the manufacturer of that enclosure, distribution board or consumer unit. Now that all seems quite innocuous, but it's actually got some quite significant repercussions as we go through this, and the industry will actually suffer if it gets in. So Frank can go to the next.
So I'll comment on Regulation 536.4.203, which is a UK only regulation. We feel this proposed new regulation has no place in 7671. It's not a safety orientated regulation. BSEN 61439 doesn't make reference to or recommend that manufactured equipment must be used in the same manufacturing enclosure. BSEN 61439 clearly states that where devices are to be operated by ordinary persons, then this equipment need only comply with the manufacturing standard for that device, and not that it is manufactured by the enclosure's manufacturer. This newly proposed UK-only regulation is anti-competitive and a direct block to free trading. There is not a requirement in European or international standards. British standards are not to be used to incorporate strategic marketing or restrict free marketplace and manufacturing industry within the UK. To this end, this new regulation must not be included in the 18th edition of PS 7671.
So, as you can imagine from what Frank just said, we're going to be proposing negatively for that. We will be proposing that we reject and remove proposed 5364-203 from 7671 on the grounds that it cites non-factual requirements, is anti-competitive and not based on the requirements for electrical safety in the UK.
So questions on the change to this regulation. So you need to consider, do you install conductors, timers, surge protection, line control, transformers with an existing distribution boards or consumer units? If the change affects the work you carry out, it's going to have a material effect on what you have to do. I mean, you have to use the same manufacturer's products in everything you do. In some cases, some manufacturers might not include the product range you require for the work you carry out. Does a single manufacturer provide all the equipment you install in distribution boards? If it does, you find you'll be covered by this regulation. But if you use different pieces of equipment from different manufacturers, this regulation will prevent you from doing so.
So, the next proposed DPC alteration, 536.5, used to be called coordination of switching devices with other current protected devices. It's now just documentation. And another innocuous one, it's asking for information mentioned in the previous regulations for coordination of electrical devices and various documentation, manufacturers' documentation, etc. It's asking that it shall be added to the design documentation in accordance with the requirements of Regulation 514.9. That's not strictly true. Regulation 514.9 doesn't require design documentation to be appended to any verification or documentation at all. So we feel it's a little inaccurate, and changes need to be made to it to ensure that it's factual and is not misleading at all.
So our comment on 536.5, we feel, again, this proposed new regulation is not factual. The reference is made to 514.9. This regulation is directed more at the marking of devices at or in the consumer unit or distribution board or not any other enclosure. And Regulation 514.9 clearly states that all that is required is a simple diagram, a chart or a table. It's not required or practical to append manufacturer's data to either the EIC on initial verification or even at distribution boards. The proposed regulation refers to a previously newly proposed regulation, which in itself is inappropriate and should be removed. The exception can be made on more complex installations where CDM regulations or BIM regulations require this additional information. It's not a safety electrical requirement. There's more of a hint that the installer has been used to market and manufacture equipment and advertising it wherever possible. This is a type of secondary marketing which cannot be allowed in BS 7671. Marketing is not an electrical safety requirement.
So, as you can imagine, NAPIT have a proposal. That is to change the draft to the following wording. And that's basically to ask for any equipment or documentation to be given to the person ordering the work, where CDM, BIM, or other regulatory requirements specifically require it. It shouldn't be done cause of practice. It shouldn't be done automatically, because it's not a requirement. However, where certain design, build, and installation requirements need information being passed to the person ordering the work, then it should be carried out, and that's what should happen. Documentation 7671 should mirror this and should reflect this. So this NAPIT proposal, we feel, covers everything required.
And the next one we have is Regulation 542.1.201. And this is an existing regulation and it has an additional wording added to it. And as it states there in the green, additionally, this will be an earth electrode supplementing any earthing facility provided by the distributor in accordance with one of the requirements of Regulation 542.2.3 to prevent the appearance of a dangerous touch voltage in the event of a loss of the main connection to earth.
Okay, so We feel this new proposed new regulation is not really mature at this stage. It's been brought about to help out the ENA, the DNOs, to where they might have a loss of pin conductor and they might lose a neutral, which is all very well and good. Currently, 7671 gives guidance on the size of earthing conductors, main and supplementary bonding conductors, etc., based on the installation, earthing type, etc., line, neutral. However, in the event of a loss of a main connection to earth via the supplies earth or neutral conductor, there is no conductor sizing recommendations, tables, calculations, or anything like that for this new scenario. This is a problem. In the event of a loss of a supplier's earth or neutral from an installation or other nearby installation, it can be affected or it can affect the installation that has an electrode fitted in this way. If that electrode presents a lower resistance path to earth, the level of potential operating load currents present in this earthing system of an installation from a defect in another installation could be way higher than the maximum design load of the installation being affected. It could be getting close to the defective supplier's maximum design. It could come through or be channeled through your earthing system. We don't feel that's acceptable. We don't feel the cabling or the earth electrodes, bonding conductors, etc., have been thought about. So we don't feel that this at this particular time this is a mature regulation to put in.
Nice. We feel that BS 7671 should provide information on the safety requirements for the installation design. BS 7671 should not be used to specify requirements in the case of the failure of a supply, which is out of the scope of our regulations. It is the energy supplier's responsibility to supply an effective, stable supply and comply with the requirements of the Electricity Supply Quality and Continuity Regulations, ESQCR, which may require them in certain circumstances to provide a reliable means of earth. If this is not the case and they're unable to provide this, then all electrical supplies in the UK should be treated as TT, and therefore the installation of earth electrodes.
So we've got 2 or 3 proposals that we will be putting forward, varying slightly. First one, delete the 18th edition DPC change and leave as the existing MD3 regulation. BS 7671 should not be used to design for the failings of an energy supplies network. Delete the changes to 5421.201 until such time as a credible and proven advice can be formulated. So take it out, and if you must put it in at a time when you can give the correct information to those designing installations to take account of this. Proposal 3. Just treat all supplies in the UK as a TT. If there is a likelihood of an unreliable earth or a neutral facility being provided by the energy supplier, which we feel is an unacceptable scenario, then just change the regulation to ensure that all installations are TT. And where regulations associated with non-electrode requirement installations should be reviewed and removed where necessary. So we're recommending 5421.201. Quite simply, the main earthing terminal shall be connected with earth by one of the methods of regulation 542.2.3.
The next one we're going to look at is regulation 643.2.1. And as we discussed in our last webinar, the Part 6 regulations have changed numbers. Majority of them stay as they are, but this one does change, as you can see the wording of it. It states a continuity of conductors and connections to exposed conductor parts and extraneous conductor parts, if any, shall be verified by measurement of resistance on protected conductors, including protected bonded conductors, and in the case of ring finder circuits, the live conductors as well as the protected conductors. So it's a change to a verification of a measurement of resistance for protected conductors.
So we intend to comment in so much as the new requirements asking for a measurement to be made of the circuit. However, it's not giving any acceptable parameters of readings that you maintain. So it's asking you to measure something, but not giving you a reading to compare it against. And once you've taken that reading, there's nowhere to put it down. There's merely a tick box. So we feel that juncture, you can't really do that. You either need to change the way the new regulation or the draft is being worded, or make some changes elsewhere, put some more information in. But at the minute, we feel it's lacking.
So we have two proposals for Regulation 643.2.1. And the first proposal is leave the regulations as the two preceding regulations, which were 612.2.1 and 612.2.2, which should now be referred to 643.2.1 and 643.2.2. And the second proposal is include tables with figures of resistance for main supplementary bonding conductors and make space available where the bond or conductor verification now is on the appropriate model forms. This is so it enables you to record the measurement of resistance and compare it against a table of figures for that resistance, similar to what we do for the ZS values in the earth loop tables, where we make a measurement of earth loop values and it has to meet the maximum requirements of the various ZS tables.
And another proposed DC alteration, polarity. So polarities, there's a big piece put in the front there, where relevant, polarity, supply, etc. And we've got some issues with this new proposal, specifically where single pole switching devices are not permitted in neutral conductor. They're not permitted in neutral conductor, so why would we put that in a regulation? It's confusing. We've also got some issues with the test polarity, where you should be carrying that out. Polarity throughout the installation, we've got some issues with that. We don't feel this DPC proposed alteration, is really telling us what we want to know. So we're going to be putting forward some proposals.
So our comment on this is there needs to be a change to this regulation. It is flawed. It needs to have both references to the single pole devices being allowed in neutral conductors to be removed, and that the polarity refers to the whole installation, not the socket outlets and similar accessories. And it needs to be made clear what the polarity covers and what it should be checked for.
So as Frank said, we need to be looking at polarity and where we need to be checking. So we intend to keep, or our proposal will be to keep the first section, polarity of the supply at the origin, which is important. The part single pole device is not permitted in the neutral. We feel that's not necessary, it's not a requirement, shouldn't be in there, shouldn't even be used, so we've taken that out. The test of polarity should also be made to verify. We're proposing putting that part back in, but modifying the wording so it says shall also be made, which implies that you will test the polarity at the origin of the supply, and also you will test to make sure and verify that indent 1 stays as normal. It's the existing wording. Indent 2, in circuits having an earth neutral conductor, centre contact bayonet and Edison screw lamp holders must have the outer or screw contacts connected to the neutral conductor. We modify that wording because it's simpler and cleaner in this way. It's not quite so ambiguous as it was before. It could be taken as being slightly difficult or slightly confusing. Indent 3, wiring has been correctly connected throughout the installation. Polarity should be made to verify throughout the installation, not just the socket outlets and similar accessories. It should be throughout the installation. So the key there is check the polarity at supply at the origin of the installation, and then throughout the installation, wherever you are, all the way to the end. Motors, junction boxes, everything. They should be connected correctly.
And we come to NAPIT's comment on Part 8. Our comment proposal is fairly straightforward with this one. It's to remove Part 8 and all its associated references. We feel Part 8 is not a fundamental requirement for electrical safety. It is about energy efficiency of a building designed to certain parameters. We therefore do not feel it should be included in BS 7671. And we say it should be removed and become a standalone document for those design and installations for a specific use, where it could be referred to specific requirements for energy efficiency dependent on the client's preferences and responsibilities. So that brings us to the end of the 18th edition comments we've gone through. If you have any questions, we're quite welcome to take any questions you have on any comments you've heard tonight or any other comments you've got on the 18th edition.
One of the questions we've got this evening is are these proposals on the NAPIT website?
No, these are NAPIT proposals, and we will be submitting these to VSI. We'll be putting these on VSI's website in the same way everybody else does, but obviously we'll be registering as an organisation. We will be registering NAPIT's proposals and comments, and that's how they will be seen by JPOL 64.
So if you have any comments from tonight's slides, you can submit your own comments based on those and how it affects you in your installation work and your day-to-day business, and make comments in that manner.
Okay, another question we've had. During any ICR, if you come across equipment not manufactured by the enclosure manufacturer, I assume this would mean that it should be advised that the equipment should be removed?
We haven't, as it's a DPC proposal, if no one commented and it went through, then the industry would need to look at that from a coding perspective to see where we went with it. At present, it wouldn't really be coded unless it was causing a problem or actually didn't fit. But at the minute, there would be a code, I guess, but we haven't worked that out yet. We would have to wait until the DPC is confirmed, 7671 is published, and if that particular clause is in there, then the industry will look at that and see where we need to go with coding it.
Yes, if you've got existing equipment in that manner, first of all, you'd be looking at it in terms of electrical safety. Not necessarily just that the manufacturer equipment has different equipment in that enclosure, but it could be put down as an FI code further investigation, which might lead to some problems within that manner. Normally you find someone trying to wedge in different manufacturers, breaker and distribution board. I've come across those where the breakers operate in different directions, so one switching left and one switching right to be off, which can cause problems within the installation and safety requirements.
Okay, another question we've had concerning the need for the possibility of loss of electrical distributors' earth supply. What of premises where installing an additional earth electrode is difficult, e.g. an upper floor flat, with the proposed draft clause require installing of earth rods?
This is all part of the problem that we are foreseeing, so this is part of the reason we don't think that particular clause has been well thought out and is a little immature, so we don't think it should be put in, because obviously these things have got to be thought about and they will pose a big problem.
Yes, and with apartment blocks and those type of premises, there is a lot of communal services up and down the building, and if you were to install an electrode up to each level of the property, you're going to have possible cross connections and lead to faults, not potentially going to the electrode, but going to other apartments as a return path. As we know, it takes the path of least resistance, and that could be someone else's property and cause other effects within adjacent properties.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us this evening. If you've got any more questions that we didn't have time to cover, don't forget you can access the NAPIT technical helpline on 0345 543 0330. It's also the online forum where you can discuss technical issues amongst yourselves at forum.napit.org.uk. We'll also be covering the 18th edition of the wiring regulations, as well as various other technical topics at this year's NAPIT Expo. If If you want to know more or find out which event is nearest to you, just visit www.napitexpo.co.uk. We'll make a recording of tonight's webinar available tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel, and we'll leave the webinar running for a few minutes now to allow you to download the certificate from the handout section. If you can fill out the survey once the webinar closes, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Future webinars will be announced on the online forum over social media, so keep an eye out for that also. Once again, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.